Well, if everything's working, welcome to the Jeff Bushman Experience. I almost said experiment, and that's really what it is, because we are now working with a new camera and a little bit of new lighting, and I hope the image and the sound are all good. If they're not, it's my fault. Welcome. We have a number of things we're going to talk about today. We're not going to do This Week in History. Instead, we are going to talk about presidential candidates. We're going to talk about a new study that's come out about what kind of man makes the best lover. And I'm happy to tell you it has nothing to do with height. We're going to talk about a new Tesla battery that's becoming available and why it may affect you, depending on where you live. And we're also going to talk about Tiger Woods and 3D printing. With that in mind, I guess we can start. But before we do, let me share with you that if you're watching this on YouTube, which I assume is how you are watching it, look down below where my face is. I'm pointing downward. There should say the word subscribe somewhere down there, particularly if you find during this this video you're liking what you're seeing. Please go ahead and decide to subscribe. I won't get your email address, but YouTube will, and that will allow them to notify you every time we upload a new video. We generally do our videos on Sundays, and today, in fact, is Sunday. It is May the 2nd, which reminds me, a couple of days from now is Star Wars Day, so called because it'll be May the 4th, and the expression is, "May the 4th be with you." I didn't make it up. I'm not responsible. Don't blame me. Okay. Also coming up is May the 5th, or as we say in Spanish, or those of us who speak any Spanish at all, and many people who don't, it's Cinco de Mayo, which literally means the 5 of May, or the 5th of May, and it is observed as a day of celebration. It's not really a holiday. Nobody takes the day off for it, unless the night before you had a terribly long night of drinking, in which case you may not have a choice but to take the day off for it to nurse a hangover. I'm going to take a sip of tea now. Watch this. And the celebration is not Mexican Independence Day, and it's not, I don't know, I've heard other explanations. It's none of those things. What it is it's a celebration of the battle in which Mexican soldiers beat French soldiers at what is called the Battle of Puebla. And the reason that's important is the French soldiers were dominating Mexico, had essentially colonized Mexico, and the leader of the French in Mexico was Napoleon III, yes, the grandson of Napoleon Bonaparte. There's an old joke about Napoleon's name, and I'll come back to that in case there's anyone in this audience who hasn't heard that. But this was the grandson of Napoleon Bonaparte, and he was the Emperor of Mexico. And the Mexican soldiers, as I said, beat the forces of the French and basically forced them out, but it wasn't an absolute immediate departure. So it did establish the Mexican Army, which was a group of relatively ragtag soldiers, much like our own American revolutionaries, our own American revolutionary soldiers, and they battled the French just as we battled the English with a similar result. But it was the Battle of Puebla which they won and which really established them as a force to be reckoned with. And that's why Cinco de Mayo is celebrated. Mostly actually celebrated in the United States by people of Mexican descent, those who feel an affinity for Mexico, and those who are looking for an excuse to have a lot of tequila. It will work for all of those things. But that's what's coming up on the 5th of May. I also wanted to mention that there are a couple of sites I'd invite you to, one of which is bushmanbooks.blogspot.com. There you can see some of our writing, and more to the point, it'll also lead you to some of our books that are up on Amazon in the Kindle format. And as we've mentioned on this program before, and you probably know, you do not have to have a Kindle reader to read Kindle books. You can download that. By the way, that shake was as a result of my knee hitting the table where the camera is, and I apologize for that. The Kindle reader can be downloaded for free That is a Kindle app or program. It can be downloaded free to your smartphone for the app or to your computer. And it is free, and with it you can read Kindle books. There are some Kindle books that are available free through Amazon, and there are many, many others that are available for a price anywhere from 99 cents to use your imagination. But those Kindle books are available, and you can read them on your computer or on your phone. I would suggest the latter, because reading them on your computer is about as dull an experience as you can have. Okay, let's talk about the program either next week or the week after, I'm not sure which. We're going to be joined by a chiropractor who's going to talk to us about different methodologies of chiropractic as well as nutrition. And we'll be talking about that. And we also have some other plans in the offing. We've got some authors ready to go in the next few weeks, and we will tell you about that as they happen. Meantime, if you have anything you want to talk to us about with regard to the program, feel free to drop us a line at TJB Radio, TJB at gmail.com. And if you don't like the show or you have something you want to say, tell us there. If you do like the show, please do us the kindness of telling a friend and telling them where they can find us. And the way you find us is by going to youtube.com. I know you know that because you're here. But looking specifically in the search box within YouTube, look at the search box that says Jeff Bushman Experience. Also, if you do that on Google, we're right there on the first page, Jeff Bushman Experience. If you just look for the name Jeff Bushman, we're on about page 17,455. No, actually, we're on about page 3. But as a friend of mine says, if you're not in the first couple of pages, you're invisible. So look for Jeff Bushman Experience, please. Okay, talking about things in the news. First, the big news, Lindsey Vonn and Tiger Woods have broken up. I just have one question. Who's Tiger Woods? No, I really do have a question, which is, who's Lindsey Vonn? I know who Tiger Woods is. He's a golfer. I'm not totally in the dark. But I know Lindsey Vonn is a woman. Beyond that, I have no clue. I'm sure someone will tell me after the program, but I really don't know who Lindsey Vonn is. I assume she's probably an entertainer, or the breaking up probably wouldn't have her name in it. But that's the story. They're breaking up, and there's probably someone who cares about this story besides Tiger and Lindsey, but I'm not one of them. Also, let's see. Oh, Tesla. Tesla makes the electric car, the Tesla. And by the way, I'm in Arizona, and the other day I had to stop. I'm trying to remember where it was. Either in or near Buckeye, Arizona. For those of you who are not familiar with this area, Buckeye is from Phoenix due west. Buckeye is also supposed to become, over the next several years, a major metropolis. If you've ever been to Buckeye, you may be holding your ribs with laughter as I say that, but it is predicted by people in the real estate business and in studies of these sorts of things that Buckeye is supposed to become a major metropolis sometime within the next 15, 20 years. It's one of those things I'll believe when I see, but that's the story with Buckeye. Anyway, I was out there, and they had several Tesla charging stations, places where Tesla automobiles could come in, plug in, and charge. And I had never seen that before anywhere. I haven't been in LA in a while. I wouldn't be surprised if they have them in LA and San Francisco. But I saw this in Buckeye, Tesla charging stations. Maybe they have a Tesla dealer out there. I don't know. But anyway, interesting. But Tesla has come out with a couple of really interesting things besides the vehicle. First off, they're involved in space travel in the sense of trying to develop a commercially viable travel plan for those who wish to become space tourists. And I know that in the universities and colleges here in Arizona and elsewhere, there are many, many more people studying astronomy than used to. I know that because I heard a professor saying that they're doing nothing but taking up space, and I'm sure that's what he meant. In any event, Tesla has invented now, or is in the process of creating, a battery that can easily be used in a home to store solar energy. Why is that important? I'm glad you asked that question. It's important because up until now, if you wanted to get involved with solar power at your home, you had a couple of choices. One is you could put all of those photovoltaic cells, they're called, up on the roof of your house, and they would gather sun, and they would change them to energy, of course, change the sun's power into kilowatts or watts, and you could run a lot of your electric power in your home off of the sun. If you were creating more power, or more correctly, the sun was creating more power than you needed at a given time, then you could cause that energy to flow back to the electric utility, which would then pay you for it at the retail rate. So, to give you an example, let's assume that it takes $40 in a specific hour to run my home, and my photovoltaic cells are creating $50 worth of power. That extra $10 worth of power would flow back to the utility and give me credit for $10 worth of power, which would, when I next needed to use power from the grid, that would basically be free. Okay. Or I'd get a discount of $10 toward the use of it. That's okay, but first off, the utilities hate this. First, because some of the capacity of the grid is being tested. The grid is not really designed for that, and there are limitations on how much of that they can take and use, and thus end up at break even on that extra power. The other problem is that they're in the business to go ahead and sell power, not to buy it. So they really dislike it, and they're trying to find ways to charge users of solar power more money so that it won't be such a bargain. But that process is called net metering, and they don't like it, the utilities. The people like it because it gives them, obviously, a good cluck for the buck, and creates a faster payback on their investment in the solar power that they've installed in their home. What the other choice was to get a whole bank of batteries, get what's called an inverter, and have that power convert from, or if you will, invert, from the, whatever the wattage is, I'm not technically oriented in this way, whatever wattage is that's taken down from the sun through the photovoltaic cells, you would get a whole bank of batteries and store that extra power in those batteries, 12-volt batteries, car batteries. And the process of it was both expensive and clunky, very cumbersome. So what Tesla is in the process of doing is creating one battery that has, from what I understand, enough storage that you can essentially have one battery. When that battery goes south, you would go get another battery, not a big deal. But that would store a bunch of extra power that is generated by the sun, so you wouldn't need to send the extra power through the grid to the electric utility. You could store it in that battery and then use it as needed, for example, at night when there's no sun shining. There is sun, but it's not shining where you are at night. And that would allow you to store a lot of power and, again, not use as much power from the grid, which would ease the burden on the grid and at the same time allow you to not have to screw with the electric company, essentially. And by the electric company, I'm referring to your local utility, not the old show on PBS. Okay, also, a study came out recently, in the last few days, I think, that said that funny men, humorous men, make the best lovers. Okay, I think it should, if it isn't true, it should be. I don't know why I think that, but there you are. Now, I should tell you, the study was done by the National Council of Clowns, so don't know. Anyway, that was the study, and I would argue to the death that that's absolutely true. It doesn't say anything about short men, by the way. All right. So that was that study. Also, this is really, before we get into our main topic, which is going to be the entry into the race of Bernie Sanders, how we refer to our presidential candidates in some cases by first names, and all of that. But before we get into that, there's something in the news that really is worth talking about. And I keep hitting my knee on the table. And I apologize for that. By the way, this is but let's talk about this for a moment. This is a new camera we're using. It is a Samsung camera, and it is recording in what is called 1080p. I think that's pixels. No, it probably is not pixels, but whatever it is, it's 1080p, and it's considered not only high definition, but the higher of two high definition formats. The other one is 720. So you should be getting a much better picture than you've observed in our more recent uploads, in which we just use a computer, a laptop computer, and if this is 1080p and the second best is 720, that was probably about 12. The picture was lousy and would show movement kind of like a fade whenever there was motion to see. So this should be better. I hope it is. I am less, what's the word, sanguine. I'm less sanguine about the sound quality. I believe it'll be okay. In our experiments, when we did this, we hooked up the card to the computer, and when we played it back, the sound quality was okay, but there seemed to be a little bit of a problem with syncing the image and the sound. So you may experience some of that. If you do, I apologize, and we'll try to remedy it in futuro. Also, we have, you may be able to tell, you may not, much better lighting today than we've had in our past programs. So we hope you'll find the entire experience, there's that word again, a little bit more enjoyable. And again, would ask you to share this program with your friends. Also, if you would like to know, outside the issue of subscribing, if you would like to be informed, not automatically, but by me, when a new broadcast is available, send me your email address, if you would, at tjbradio@gmail.com. I'm not going to use it to sell you products or anything like that, but if you're interested in just being communicated with so you know about the next program, feel free to drop a note with your email address to that effect. Let's talk for a while, and then after this we'll probably conclude the show, but this will take us a while. Talk about presidential candidates. First off, if I say Hillary, everybody knows who I mean. And Carly, same thing. And now we add Bernie to the mix. And to each of those people, we talk about Hillary and we talk about Bernie. I haven't really heard people talk about Carly. Until Bernie Sanders announced that he's running for president, which he did earlier this week. By the way, for purposes, I did, I guess. I was going to say for purposes of record keeping, I probably should mention today is the 2nd of May, 2015. I probably mentioned it was the 2nd of May. I don't know that I mentioned it's 2015, but it is. So happy Dios de Mayo. No, that was wrong. Dios. No, we don't ever talk about Dios here. Happy Dos de Mayo. There's some kind of terrible slip there. I believe in Dos. Anyway, but when you talk about Hillary, again, we know who it is. And until Bernie Sanders entered the race, as he did this week, I had thought that the reference to Hillary Clinton as Hillary was kind of a, depending on who's saying it, either an expression of a feeling of familiarity, if it was said by supporters, or an expression of somehow demeaning the former Secretary of State, Senator, and First Lady by just referring to her as her first name, refer to her by her first name. We wouldn't talk about Ted or Marco or Chris or Joe, typically, but we did Hillary. And I mentioned a moment ago Carly. Carly Fiorina is a Republican who used to be the president or CEO of Hewlett-Packard, who was fired by her board of directors, perhaps unjustifiably. But after that, she started getting involved in Republican politics. And she ran a couple of years ago against Barbara Boxer, the senator from California, attempting to unseat Barbara Boxer, and Carly Fiorina lost. So she's never held elective office. She lost in her race for the U.S. Senate from California. So the natural next step is obviously, if you can't hold your job in corporate America and you can't win an election for the Senate, you run for president. Of course, that's natural and normal. That's what you do. So Carly Fiorina is running for the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States. Uh, but I've never heard anybody refer to her just as Carly. And now Bernie Sanders is in the race, and people refer to him as Bernie. So I'm not altogether sure what it means, but I think that, again, it depends who it is we're talking about and who it is it's talking. I feel perfectly comfortable talking about Bernie. I find it, like as I said before, kind of like it's demeaning to talk about Hillary as Hillary. If I say Hillary Clinton, that seems perfectly okay to me, and maybe it's my own hang-up, but there you are. But now Bernie Sanders has entered the race. Let's talk about what that does or may mean, and the simple answer for that is nobody knows. Anybody who tells you that they know what Bernie Sanders' entry into the race for the Democratic nomination for the presidency, what that means, they tell you they know, they're lying. Nobody knows, because it involves making predictions. By the way, have you ever noticed people always talk about predicting the future? What else could you predict? You can't predict the past, I don't think. Maybe not. Anyway, nobody can predict what's going to happen as a result of Bernie Sanders' candidacy. I'll tell you what people are saying, and you've heard it. People are saying, well, he represents a very small portion of the Democratic Party. Not true, by the way. He represents a very small portion of the Democratic Party, and what he's going to do is he's going to pull Hillary to the left, and that's a good thing. Okay, first off, I'm not sure pulling Hillary Clinton to the left would benefit her in the general election. Clearly in primaries, both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, in the primaries, the candidates run more to the extremes because that's where the base is. So Hillary Clinton will tend to run more liberally than she will in the general election with or without Bernie Sanders. And additionally, him being in the race, pulling her to the left, may not be an advantage to her in the sense that if she runs in the general election and she's already made these statements that are more liberal than she feels comfortable with, then what could happen is it could cost her votes in the general election from independents and conservatives. My opinion is that's not going to happen. But my opinion, and again, that's all it is that Hillary Clinton will say all the same things she would have said with or without Bernie Sanders in the race. I don't think he's going to make a big difference on that score. Where he could make a difference is, number one, in educating the public. What is a socialist? If you're watching this and you consider yourself a moderate or a conservative, and you've found favor in the accusation against President Obama that he's a socialist, my first response is that Bernie Sanders being in the race could be a big help to you because you may finally learn what a socialist actually is. Bernie Sanders is a self-described socialist, a democratic socialist, as he says, and what a socialist is not is a communist. A lot of people act as if they believe that a socialist is the same as a communist. Therefore, when they called President Obama a socialist, it was a way really of calling him a communist without using that word, because nobody's a communist anymore, with the possible exception of Raul Castro, or the guy who runs Azerbaijan. But other than that, there are no communists anymore. Of course there are, but I mean, even in China, they're introducing capitalism. So I'm not sure what communism tells you, but most people don't know what a socialist is. My own definition is that a socialist, and this may not be entirely accurate, a socialist is someone who believes that certain operations in the economy ought to be run by the government. For example, bus and train service, mail delivery, the military. Okay, and when you say the military, a lot of people would say, well, of course the military. But in point of fact, our military is only partly government run. A lot of what the government does is to contract with private providers like Blackwater. That's a whole other discussion for a whole different day. But not all our military operations are in fact run by the government. So that's what a socialist really is. Now it goes beyond that, and there's certain things that socialists believe additionally, such as that, as a rule, that, and again, there are all kinds of socialists, just as there are all sorts of libertarians, Rand Paul, but in terms of socialism, the socialists generally believe that there are certain things that ought to be rights rather than privileges. For example, and Bernie Sanders has been talking about this, health care. And lots of people say health care should be a right. That doesn't make them socialists. Not all beliefs that socialists have, if you share those, makes you a socialist. There's nothing wrong with being a socialist if that's your preference, but again, nothing is, what's the word I'm looking for? Nothing's uniform in terms of beliefs. Not everybody who agrees with Bernie Sanders on most of his issues is necessarily ipso facto a socialist, and not everybody who's a socialist will agree with everything that Bernie Sanders feels or states. So let's talk about Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders, by the way, if you are interested in his campaign, you won't find out much information yet until later this month. But if you are interested in contributing to his campaign, you can go to berniesanders.com, B-E-R-N-I-E, Sanders.com, and you can make a contribution there. A bunch of people have. Let me tell you something really interesting. Except for a couple of the high flyers like Scott Walker and Jeb Bush, the Republican candidates who have been running for the presidency have, within 24 hours of their announcements, have brought in less money than Bernie Sanders. Okay? In the first 24 hours after his announcement that he was running for president, he took in $1.5 million, a little more than that. Moreover, here's the interesting part. The average contribution was $43. That's pretty impressive, because what it means is that there are a lot of people donating, and you're not typically talking about major contributors. I have not contributed to his campaign. Not that I would necessarily hesitate to do that, I just haven't done it. And if I do, by the way, I probably won't give $43, but that's because I'm cheap. But I say I mean my wife and I. But of the two of us, I'm cheap. But that's pretty remarkable. Now, the reason I am mentioning that is not just to urge you to go to his campaign if you agree with his views, go to his campaign website if you agree with his views, but also it's interesting because he has been made into by the what is variously called mainstream media or corporate media. He has been, that's what I'm looking for, he's been described as a candidate who is out of the mainstream and realistically out of the running. My respectful suggestion is that's nonsense. I think in addition to creating a vigorous debate, which everybody thinks would be a wonderful idea in terms of the Democratic nomination, I think he may in fact be a viable candidate. By the way, Hillary Clinton raised less than that when she announced her candidacy. All of those other Republican candidates other than